There you go. I think they got it now.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Bye.
We're good, guys. Ready? Okay. Good morning. It is now 10:55. I'll call the Pension Committee of the Sturgeon Water Board to order. General Counsel, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Kennedy? Absent. Director Pesho?
Here.
Director Anthrop?
Here.
Director Thomas?
Here.
Director Greenidge?
Here.
Miss Jackie Shine?
Here.
Miss Rebecca Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Mubashir Magbul?
Here.
Mr. Dexter Joseph? Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We will now proceed with our first presentation item, the Employees Retirement System of the Sturgeon Water Board, the Actuarial Valuation Report as of January 1, 2026. Are we connected to Mitchell?
We are.
Okay.
Um,
Mitchell?
Can you hear me? Yes, sir.
Yes. Mitchell?
Yes. All right. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to discuss the January 1, 2026 valuation results.
Volume?
Can you hear me okay?
Not really.
We're just waiting on the volume to get turned up.
Okay.
That's better.
That's good?
Yep.
That's good.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Today, we'll talk about the 2026 funding valuation results for the pension plan. And we have one item recommended mortality assumption update. We'll talk about that. And we'll just look at a history of contributions and benefit payments, et cetera. So dive right in on slide 3. This is the slide we like to show each year. Kind of gives a good graphical representation of kind of how the funding works and the liabilities work. So on the left-hand side, the blue column is the present value of future benefits. This is if you take all the retirees' current benefits and project them out into the future with survivorship and COLAs and discount them back to the valuation date, and do the same thing with all the other members, active employees, but you project them with all the assumptions, pay increases, retirement rates, et cetera. The present value of the future expected benefits is $420.2 million. The middle column divides that present value into 3 pieces. The actual accrued liability, or AAL, that is the piece attributable to past service. That is the liability we talk about for the plan. When we say the plan liability, that's just shy of $375 million. And then the normal cost, which is the current accrual for the year, that is $6.4 million. And then the remainder of $39 million is the expected value of the normal costs that will accrue in future years for the employee population. And then the far right column takes the actual accrued liability and divides that into 2 pieces. The funded piece, the amount funded by the actual value of assets, the AVA, $276 million, and the remaining unfunded piece of the accrued liability of $98.8 million. So as we'll talk about, what the funding policy does is it wants to make sure that the current year accruals or normal cost is funded, along with an amortization payment of the unfunded amount, so that you head towards 100% funding. On the next slide,
Can you, excuse me, Mike, I
Yes, sir.
wanted to see this NC, does it include your cost plus the portfolio manager's commission?
So within the determination of the discount rate, there is a component for expenses that is netted out of that discount rate. So effectively, plan expenses are accounted for in how the liability is discounted. But there is not a direct load to the normal cost that in that manner. Instead, it's done via the discount rate.
So what NC accounts for?
NC accounts for the value of the current year worth of accruals for the employees. So the change in the value of their accrued benefit over the course of the year for accruing an additional year of service, and for any pay increases that go into their average compensation that changes from beginning of year to end of year.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. On the next slide, we talk about the funding policy. Recall we adopted, the board adopted changes to the funding policy back in 2021. And the current funding policy determines the assets. It doesn't look at the market value of assets, but looks at a smooth value of assets, which we'll talk more about. That smoothing period recognizes gains and losses in the investments relative to the 7% assumed return over a 7-year period. And then there's a corridor around that, so such that the smooth value can't be less than 70% or greater than 130%. So if there were very large swings in the market value, then there would be some protection in the smoothing against recognizing that in the year that happens. As you know, the amortization method of the unfunded, that was at $98 million we talked about a slide ago. That is done in layers. There was an initial transition layer when this policy was adopted, and that is all these are closed amortization periods. That was done over a 29-year period which is now down to 24 years as of January 1, 2026. As gains and losses emerge each year, there's a new amortization layer that's amortized over 25 years. Assumption changes, same thing, and plan amendments, if there are any, would be amortized over 15 years. Next slide just looks at plan membership over the last couple of years, and it's broken into the categories of active employees, vested terminated, who have terminated with a vested benefit are entitled to a retirement benefit in the future, provided they do not withdraw their contributions between now and then. Non-vested terminated employees who are just due a refund of their employee contributions, and retirees and beneficiaries currently receiving payments from the plan. And you can see that over the last couple of years, the active employees, they've actually, from 2024 to now, the population has declined a little bit. There was some growth in 2025 from 1,190 up to 1,220, and then now we're back down to 1,162. The vested terminated population is relatively stable. You have people coming in and coming out of that. Non-vested, again, similar in size. Each year, folks are getting paid out, but there's more new people entering that population that terminate. And the retiree and beneficiary population, there have been more additions to that population than exits, where the way folks exit that is via dying and payments stop if they have no surviving spouse entitled to a spousal benefit. And so relatively stable population overall, but again, those changes in the categories over the last couple of years. And then the footnote just shows you the number of drop employees. The drop employees were at about 60 for the last couple of years, and this year that popped up to 91, meaning a bunch of folks entered the drop in the last year, more so than exited by completing the what is usually a 5-year drop period. The next slide looks at the change in the actuarial accrued liability. Recall that was in that middle column in that earlier graphic of 374.8 million, which is the ending value in line 8 here. Last year we had a $368 million accrued liability. It grows by normal costs for those additional accruals during the year. It grows by interest, which is basically there's one less year of discount applied to future benefits. And then there's gains and losses for deviations between what we assumed would happen to the population, salary increases, number of terminations and retirements, et cetera, and what actually happens. So relatively small gain or loss relative to the total liability. Assumption changes, which we'll talk about, that's a mortality update. And then benefits paid during the year reduce the liability. As you pay the benefits out, the liability goes down. And that was 26.6 million. And then as folks transfer in and out, there's also assets that are transferred in and out associated with that, but the liability grew by 1.4 million due to transfers. And so we end up at the 374.8 million this year. Next slide just talks about assumptions. As you remember, a couple years ago, we presented an experience study where we reviewed all of the assumptions, in particular retirement, disability, termination. We recommended changes to several of them, and also recommended some stay the same, like the discount rate at 7%. The next experience study isn't due until 2029. But as we talked about when we made that presentation, and some of you asked questions, well, what if there's a change that occurs between experience studies that warrants reevaluation? And such a change has happened in the last year. In 2025, the Society of Actuaries published an updated mortality study. And your current assumption is using their Society of Actuaries' last version of that mortality study called the PUB, as in Public Pension Plans 2010 mortality tables, with a projection for mortality improvement. We do, as you recall, we make adjustments to those tables to reflect the higher mortality in Louisiana compared to the national average. And when this new study was published in May of last year. It was done using the same methodology as the prior study, but it was just based on updated public pension plan mortality experience in the last, well, there's always a lag, but between 2013 and 2019, the last study looked at, I think, mortality between 2003 and 2008 or something like that. In any event, because the construction of those tables is the same, we recommend adopting them, but with the same adjustments that were made to the prior tables to reflect Louisiana's higher mortality. So it's all the adjustment factors are the same, but we advise that you use the updated standard. And the end result is this new Pub 2016 table reflects that mortality between 2010 and this 2016 table hasn't improved as much as anticipated, meaning that life expectancies are a little bit shorter under this new mortality table. If life expectancies are shorter, that means there's a little bit less future benefits that are expected to be paid, so it reduces the liability, as we'll see on the next slide. The liability on slide 8 before assumption changes for mortality would have been $375.4 million, but there's a $600,000 reduction for the adoption of this new table if the Board of Trustees does adopt it. And so that would reduce the liability to that 374.8 we've presented. While it shows 0.0 effect on the normal cost, that's rounding. There's a very small effect, but not it's negligible, and so effectively no effect on the normal cost. So just a slight reduction in the liability. And again, we would recommend that the board adopt these assumptions. All the information that we present in these slides, as well as our report, assumes that the board will indeed adopt these assumptions. If they do not, we would have to make slight modifications to the valuation results.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yeah.
Can you go back to the last slide real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wanting to understand if you're saying that this update to the mortality assumption is based on I'm seeing a lot of like Pub 16. So is it a change in a sort of actuarially accepted published rate, or are you changing it based on the actual experience of our pensioner class?
Good question. So the table itself, Pub 2016, is based on this national study done by the Society of Actuaries, and has nothing to do with the plan's actual experience. Due to the size of the plan, the plan's actual experience is not credible. Generally, to use a plan's actual experience, you'd need just over 1,000 deaths at each age. And in a plan with a couple thousand people, you're just not going to have that. So what we did instead, both during the last experience study in 24, as well as what we're recommending today, is that we just look at, we acknowledge, as does this study by the Society of Actuaries, that even though it looks at pension plans across the country in determining these tables, it acknowledges that regionally mortality experience is different, but they do not have enough data to reliably publish credible information about differences in regions. So instead, we look at information from the CDC about mortality rates nationwide versus Louisiana in this case. And it's as far as we can drill down. We can't look at mortality in New Orleans itself. The adjustments we make to the table are based on Louisiana's higher mortality, but the table itself is what is now a nationally accepted sort of best table or most recent table.
So it's an update to the table that was used previously.
Update to the table, but not any updates to the adjustment factors. Those remain the same.
Understood. Thank you.
The Louisiana adjustment factors.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So we talked about this slide, slight reduction in the liability. The next slide changes from liabilities to just look at the trust experience over the last couple of years. And as you can see in line 8, had a couple of good years of very good returns, investment returns, 17% net of expenses in 2024 and 13.5% last year, which of course exceeds the 7% long-term expected return assumption. So you have asset gains. You can see that the employer contributions went down a little bit year over year. That's reason for that is twofold. One, from 2024 to 2025, the actual determined contribution decreased from 20.8% to 18.3% from 24 to 25. So naturally, you'd expect a lower contribution level, and that's somewhat mitigated by the increase in total compensation paid, which is reflected in the employee contributions, which went up a little bit. Those remained at 6% of payroll each year, and payroll grew a little bit, so that went from 3.8 to 3.9. And then the rest, you can see the investment income of over 35 million last year, and benefit payments grew a little bit year over year from 26.4 to 26.6 million. And as I mentioned before, the city and other transfers, you have not only do you have liabilities coming in the last year, you had more transfers in than transfers out, but you had assets coming in from those other entities transferring the liabilities. So that nets out to roughly zero in terms of liabilities versus assets for those transfers. And so we end up with 293.1 million in asset value at January 1, 26. Now, the next slide, as you know, we talked about the 7-year smoothing we do of those asset gains and losses. And again, you can see in this graph the sort of the teal colored or light blue color, that is the actual value of assets. And you can see relative to the red market value, which of course goes up and down as the market goes up and down, which is more volatile. The actual value of assets smooths that out over time so that your contribution isn't jumping up and down as asset values jump up and down. But over the long term, all those gains and losses are recognized. It just doesn't happen all at once each year, which of course helps you with removing some volatility from your contribution. And as you can see right now, the market value is north of the actuarial value. But over time, again, the AVA will smooth that out and be larger than the market value at some point in the next few years, as you can just see based on the history, that in some years it's higher, in some years it's lower than the market value. On the next slide, we just look at the change in the unfunded liability over the last year. And so last year's unfunded liability was 106 million in line 1. Again, that grows with the normal cost accrual by 6.5 million. And then there's interest again for the reduction in the discount period of 7.8 million. And then that causes the unfunded to grow, but of course the employer-employee contributions reduce the unfunded. And so including interest credited on those contributions that are made throughout the year, there was 16.1 million paid during the year. And so the ending expected accrued liability in line 5 is 104.3 million. But when we remeasure the liability and the assets based on the actual experience during the year, the actual unfunded liability was lower than expected, 98.7 million. And so there's a gain as shown in line 7 of 5.5 million. And if we break that gain into its various components, there's the $600,000 reduction in the liability or the unfunded amount due to the mortality assumption change, which we already talked about. And then there are asset gains of the 4.6 million, and then the remainder 300,000 in row 8D, that's just for difference between what the population did versus what was assumed. And so that totals up to that same 5.5 million. So 5.5 million in gains, 600,000 of that being the assumption changes. And in our layered amortization approach, shown in the next slide, you'll see there's a lot of numbers here, but it's the last two rows, which are the new amortization layers in slide 12. The actual gain of 4.9 million and the remainder of the assumption change of that 559,000. Each of those under the funding policy gets amortized over 25 years. And so you can see that in the far right column. So you have two new amortization amounts, $396,000, a negative number, reducing the total amortization payment. And that assumption change of 600,000 results in a $45,000 amortization payment. So the total amortization amount, if you add all those up, is 8.1 million. And again, I'll just remind you the largest piece of that 8.1 million is that very first row, the transition amount. You can see the initial amount of that was 99 million. After 6 years of paying amortization payments on that, the outstanding balance in the second to last column is 91.7 million due to the annual amortization period, payment of 7.5. So 7.5 million of all these, of this 8.1 million is related to that transition to the new policy. And the rest is gain and loss since then due to either actual gains or losses or due to assumption changes. And so those add up to the remaining $600,000 of additional payments. And that footnote is noteworthy that that's sort of the payment. 8.1 million is the payment at the beginning of the year because the payment is paid throughout the year, each payroll period. We give that interest when developing your actually determined contribution, so that with interest to the middle of the year, that's 8.37 million. And you'll see that number again on the next slide.
Mitchell, I had a question. So there was quite a significant increase in funded percentage.
Yes.
Presentation from the last, is that due to that 5.5 million change?
That's right. It's mostly due to the asset gains and asset gains on the actuarial value of asset basis, right? So you actually have if we did your funded status based on market value this year, it would be higher because the market value is, had large gains. But again, we smooth that recognition, both gains and losses. But you're right, that is largely due to the asset gains.
So are we
in the last year.
Are we outpacing our amortization count, like schedule, for percent funded?
So
and my follow-up to that, just so you know where I'm going, is does that mean that the Sewage and Water Board administratively will have a reduction in what they have to match to go back to the schedule, like than their normal payments? Because there was already a significant reduction in what they had to pay from 21 to 18%. So if we're ahead of pace, does that mean that percent that we're contributing as a board also goes down this upcoming year?
Yeah, the percent will go down this year. On this slide, you'll note, again, those last two slices or layers, that's those gains that we just talked about, the 4.9 million, which is primarily investment gains, and the 600,000 reduction in liability due to the assumption changes. Obviously, both of those positively impact the funded status, but rather than recognize that all at once, we smooth that out and amortize it. And so, yes, that's going to be paid off or reduce your amortization period for the next 25 years. Sorry, not your amortization period, your amortization payment. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll see, if you just go to the bottom row, the employer contribution goes down from 18.3% to 18.16%, a reduction of 0.13% year over year. And so, yes, you are recognizing those gains, and you are doing that via a reduced contribution. And again, if we just kind of walk through this slide, right, the total funding policy contribution is the normal cost that we talked about. Here, it does include interest to mid-year. On the earlier slide, it did not, again, reflecting the fact you pay for it throughout the year. The unfunded liability amortization, again, if you, that footnote on the last slide that said it's 8.37 with interest to mid-year, you see that in row 1B in the 2026 column. The sum of those two amounts, $15 million this year versus $15.6 million last year, or a reduction of almost $600,000. The employee contributions, those remain flat at 6%. So those don't vary with all this experience. The employer's contribution goes up and down, but the employees does not. And so that 6% of payroll this year is 3.7. Last year, it was closer to 3.9. Again, that is based on expected payroll for the year. And as we showed earlier on the membership slide, that we have a smaller member population this year than we did last year. So we expect in aggregate a slightly smaller employee contribution due to the size of the reduced population's payroll. So that effectively is a $125,000 increase in what turns into the employer's contribution. So the employer's contribution is that total of 15 million offset by the employees of 3.7, resulting in line 3, the 11.284 million, which is a $460,000 reduction year over year. And when you look at that as a percent of payroll, it's payroll went down year over year. And so there's a reduction in payroll, but the employer's contribution still as a percent of payroll goes down to 18.16. Any questions on that slide? Okay. On the next slide, this is just a graphic that kind of shows you that unfunded liability. So today on the left-hand column, we have a 98.8 million, I think is the actual number, unfunded liability. You can see each of these little slices are the various amortization layers that we looked at a few slides ago with all those numbers. The big gray one, that's that transition amount. And so as I talked about, that amount now has $91 million in outstanding amortization. So you can see that gray bar in the very first column for 26 is 91 million. And then we've had assumption changes, which are red. Some of those increased liabilities, some of them decreased, which is why we have some numbers on this slide that are negative. And if you sum up all the layers, that's that red line that kind of curves through this graph. And so that starts on the left. The sum of the amortization amounts each year is that 99 million. And over the next 25 years, we would expect we'll get to zero and be fully funded. And you can see that that big amortization layer is paid off in 2049. That's the last year of that gray one. And so that's, when we get there, we're going to be fully funded or very close to it, depending on gains and losses and how those track, but we'll be very close. The next slide, it just looks at the last 6-7 years of cash flows and investment return. And you can see in the left-hand column, that's the employer portion of the actuarially determined contribution. The next column is the actual employer contributions. So again, we determine an employer contribution as a percent of payroll, and we are estimating payroll for the year. But the employer contribution is based on actual payroll. So that causes some differences. When payroll is higher than expected, the contribution is higher than expected. There are a few years in there where there's a large difference between what's expected and what's paid. And that is, for example, in between 2024 and 2025. In 2024, the employer contribution was 20.8% of payroll. In 2025, it was 18.3%. And the methodologies that's used is you all keep paying the prior year's percent of payroll until the valuation is published. And so when that, in 2025, when we published that report and the 20.8% went down to 18.3, you know, a good portion of the year was paid at the 20.8%, which is why in 25, there's 12.3 million contributed instead of 11.7. And by following that practice, in years where the contribution goes down, you contribute more than is necessary, and that accelerates the progression of your funded status and the payoff of the amortization amounts. Conversely, in years where the contribution percent goes up, not only do you increase the percentage to go up, but you look back and you pay for the shortfall. So if the contribution went from 18% to 19%, you would not just pay 19% going forward from the date the valuation is published, but you'd make up that year's shortfall for the part of the year that you only paid 18%. This way, the plan is always on schedule or ahead of schedule. Then moving on, the middle column just shows the change in the employee contributions year over year. And you can see they've been going up each year. Again, this year, we expect them to go down a little bit, 3.7 million versus 3.9 last year, again, because of the smaller population and the reduced expected aggregate payroll. And bin pay, you can see, has been between 23 million and 27 million over the last several years. Obviously, as retirees enter the population, if you have more new entrants than folks who pass away, those benefit payments will go up. And then you have a little bit of volatility due to the drop, where folks who exit the drop, get a large payment at the time of exiting the drop. And so, you see that population has been somewhere between 60 and 90 retirees in total. And as those folks exit, you'll have some large payments, and that's going to cause a little bit of volatility in the benefit payments each year. And then finally, the investment return. You can see you've had a lot of good years in the last 7-8 years. Had that 1 year, due to COVID, primarily, where there was a loss of 39 million. But on balance, done very well over this period. Next slide just kind of talks about that funded ratio that we talk about, and that's a measure of the plan assets, or the smooth value of plan assets, that actuarial value compared to the AAL, or actuarial accrued liability. The funding policy targets a ratio of 100%, what is now over a 24-year period based on that transition liability. And again, gains and losses will accelerate or extend that remaining 24-year period, but those get smoothed by creating new amortization layers. The funded ratio is a good indicator of the financial health of the pension plan. It's not the only determinant of financial health. It does just look at the funded status at a single point in time every January 1. It's good for tracking the trajectory of the funded status of the plan over long periods of time. But other consideration for financial health of the plan include the magnitude of the unfunded liability, that $98 million that we talked about, relative to the employer's total revenue or assets or payroll, the employer's adherence to the funding policy, which you all have adhered to, certainly since the implementation of the new policy in 21, and I believe you followed the prior policy, prior to that date. And then just the financial health of the employer. Can the employer continue to make those contributions, and so on? So, again, it's not the sole determinant, but it is a very important determinant, that funded ratio, and looking at the health of the pension plan. Next slide, we do look at the funded ratio just over the last 3 years, and you can see that it has improved from 70.2% a couple years ago to 73.65. We expect the funded ratio to improve just by virtue of those amortization payments. But of course, gains and losses in the assets and liabilities will cause fluctuation. So this number will, can go down year over year, despite the funding policy. But the funding policy makes sure that when there are losses, those get paid for over time as a new amortization layer. So, this will not always go up, but by design, it is intended to go up each year. And so this is great to see this improvement of over 3% in the last couple of years. Again, continuing on this funded ratio discussion, the next slide just kind of looks at, well, what is a good funded ratio? And so this color coded, table just gives you an idea. Again, funded ratio is not the sole determinant of plan financial health, but if you were below 50%, you'd be in the red. There would be concerns there about the ability of a pension plan to pay benefits when due, when a plan is that poorly funded. The 60% threshold is used for private ERISA plans, which is not applied to this plan, or those rules are not applied to public plans. But just to give you an idea, the ERISA rules say when a plan is below 60% funded, you need to freeze future accruals. And the idea there is make sure you pay for the past benefits due before you pay for any new benefit accruals. Again, this plan is not subject to that, but it's just kind of worth noting. As you can see in the middle in bold, your plan is at 73.7%, which is getting into the green zone. That's a good place to be. Again, we talk about above in the box above that, the 80% funded ratio and what that means for ERISA plans. The main thing of note is ERISA plans are not allowed to be amended to improve plan benefits until a plan is at least 80% funded, with an exception if the employer funds the full cost of the benefit improvement, irrespective of the funded status. And of course, your goal is right where the green meets the blue, 100% funded. That means there's no unfunded liability, and really all you're paying for at that point are the annual accruals of normal cost. And if a plan gets up to 115% or above, you then start to think, well, do we need to quit making contributions for a period of time, or do we contribute less? And so obviously a ways away from both the 100 and 115 threshold, but you're headed towards the greener and bluer colors and away from the oranger and red colors. So good progression here. And this is just, again, to give you some idea of what a well-funded plan looks like.
Mitchell, I had a question. I know it's not us, but when the benefit accruals are frozen, that means that the employees are not getting their annual accrual?
That's right. It just means that their benefit based on their pay and service at the time of the freeze is held constant. And so they're not able to get those new service and pay accruals. Once a plan gets back above the 60%, it can resume accruals. And so again, that's just an ERISA requirement, to ensure past liabilities are paid for. There's also, I could be getting in the weeds to go on, but that's the general idea.
And so do we have an idea of what other pension programs are out there in the state of Louisiana and where they're measuring up on this funded ratio?
We do. I don't have that information in here, but with the time we did the plan experience study a couple years ago, we did look at that. If I can pull that up while we're talking, I'll tell you. Give me 1 second. At the time we did this, we looked at some of the Louisiana. We didn't look at nationwide funded statuses. But for example, in 2024, NOMERS was 58.8% funded. What else? Baton Rouge was at 66% funded. Lasers, 71%. And then we had a couple others in there that range from in the 70s at the high end to the 60s at the low end. I see one, City of Alexandria was at 94%. But that was a couple years ago. I would imagine all those have improved as well. But your plan was at 70%, which was north of the ones I mentioned at that time. So
And which one is the city plan you just mentioned?
NOMERS is the city plan. It was at 58.8% at the time we did this study back in 24. I don't have the information on it today, although that should be publicly available.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see.
I do have
Then-
a question.
Yes.
And Mitchell, is probably more for the people in the room or at the table. Some retirees are concerned about the recent legislature, the laws that have passed in the legislature and how that is going to affect their pension. So just for the benefit of those retirees who may be listening, can someone speak to whether or not any of that will affect their retirement funds?
Well, the preliminary review and the outside counsel review that we obtained on the potential impact of this legislation is that there is no direct impact to the management or investment or benefits under the pension system. Now, structurally, the Board of Directors, the Board of Trustees is comprised of the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board and the elected representatives of employees and retirees. So theoretically, that composition could change over time if and as the composition of the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board changes. Once that happens, then those board members of the Board of Trustees would be different than they are now, and they would outnumber the elected employee and retiree members. But there's still legal constraints against whoever the Board of Trustees would be against doing anything that is not in the fiduciary best interest of the beneficiaries of the plan. And that's in a different body of law that was not amended.
Can I clarify on that? Go ahead.
But do we have a backup plan in case that theory does not come to fruition?
Not at this time.
If I could
Should we-
clarify on what you said, that the pension exists in separate law, and so the act that was adopted does not specifically give the city council authority to make changes to the pension.
That's correct.
But they have the authority to change the composition of the committee. That's what I understood.
No, the Board of Trustees of the pension plan consists of the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board and the elected members elected to the members of the Board of Trustees, which are the employee representatives and the retiree representative. And that's in a different body of law, and that's under the pension plan documents, which were not affected by the legislation.
Okay, so you're saying that will not change?
Well,
Right now.
the structure as it is established doesn't change, but the members will change if and as the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board change.
It would seem that the largest concern would be that if, for some reason, the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board were eliminated as an entity, that would leave a gap between who sits on the Board of Trustees.
Right.
Well, the legislation that passed, as I recall, did not eliminate the Board of Directors of the Sewage and Water Board. It eliminated the provisions that are in current law as to the method of selection as provided by state law, and for the provision that says you have to have members from each district and that kind of thing. But it does not obliterate the board. The board the statute still says that the sewage and water, public water, sewer, and drainage systems shall be under the direction and control of a sewage and water board.
So I guess the follow-up question and what we're hearing from our folks on our side is if there were to be a change in the way the plan was set up or the membership of the plan, right? With the potential impact to the city movement. The mechanism to change that would be via vote of Board of Trustees. Is that the mechanism?
That's still under review because of the
Oh.
interplay between the old legislation, the existing pension legislation, and the employees' pension plan governing document.
Okay.
Any further questions? Mitchell?
Okay, I think we just have a couple more slides
Okay.
here. The next slide just talks about next steps. So for 2026, there's an annual employer contribution resolution that would adopt the mortality assumption, subject to the Board of Trustees adopting it, and decrease the employer contribution from that 18.3% last year to 18.16% this year. Gray and I have had some back and forth on that draft resolution, so all that information is in the most recent version. So that's the formal action that would need to take place at the trustees meeting next week. And then just in terms of the last slide, what's next? In the next month or so, we'll be issuing the annual employee benefit statements, which show folks both their accrued benefits and projected benefits under a variety of assumptions. And then those will get posted to the pension portal, as well as potentially, and I don't know what the plan is this year, to distribute them hard copies as well. And then we'll be issuing the COLA calculations soon. We have a few minor issues we're working through with the benefits department on a few folks to nail down that we've got the right information, and then we'll be issuing that. So we'll probably talk about that next time we meet. And then lastly, no experience study due until 2029, but we will continue to look at the assumptions each year. And like we did this year, if there's anything we think warrants attention before 2029, we'll let you know. And that concludes the presentation. Any other questions?
Just one question. Mitchell, based on your valuation, in layman terms, what do you consider as the financial health of our pension plan now and moving forward?
I think the financial health is good, and it is headed towards a very good position. This funding policy, and the adherence to that policy by the Sewage and Water Board sort of ensures that this plan will get fully funded over time, and it is heading in that direction. And of course, given the recent investment return, it is helping it along the way. So yes, things look good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. I know you may not have the answer in front of you. What percentage of our portfolio is in AI, invested in AI?
So the investment team,
I
Martin,
do.
I think that we need to direct that toward the investment group. That's a question. Mitchell does the actuarial liability side.
I mean, but he's the overseer of everything.
No, he's a plan actuary.
Yeah. We look at the investment allocation in broader terms than that, equities and fixed income, et cetera. So I do not know the current breakdown of that.
But
The
we'll follow up with the
Sure.
investment consultant on that question. But
Because the buzz in the market is that just like the dot-com burst, the financial burst of 2008, they may have an impending burst on AI coming up in the next few weeks. So I want to make sure we shield our investment, we don't have drastic losses.
okay.
I wanted to ask, with the plan membership, it seemed like in the first couple of slides that the active members decreased. Do you see an increase coming soon down the pipeline?
Well, that is a question for you all. We do not project
Okay.
the
So there's no
growth of the,
projections that you all can do based upon what trends have been?
well, we could do projections, but we would need input
Okay.
on, from you all on how to do that. So we, um,
Okay.
each year when we do the valuation, we include the people that entered the plan or became employees in the last year. But the liabilities presented are just based on the current employee population. And as new people enter, they have a normal cost and that gets recognized in the next valuation.
So you'd
But
see
there's
it
no
based on our,
liability.
you'd see it based on our vacant budgeting efforts. So you'll
Gotcha.
see how many positions we have, and if it's 100% funded, we anticipate filling it near the beginning of the year, 50% mid-year, so you can kind of get an idea of the anticipated track of hiring through the year.
Mhm.
It just depends on how successful we are.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mitchell, for your
All
presentation.
right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let us move on to, we have two action items. Resolution R 094-2026. It is to accept the 2026 contributions to the Employees Retirement System. Gray?
Yep, thank you, Chairman. Resolution 94 follows our pension plan funding policy for fiscal 2026, is just presented by the plan actuary, estimates 11.2 million or 18.16% in the employer contributions, in addition to the regular 6% employee contributions. Amounts are slightly below fiscal year 25, driven by the small reduction in covered employees. And our continued funding is bringing up the funded status, as was just commented on. So with this resolution, and we're also accepting the actuarial recommendation to update the mortalities table, so adjusted by the Pub 2016. And thank you for the committee's vote to advance Resolution 94.
Okay, with that having been said, may I have a motion to approve Resolution 094-2026?
Aye.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment? All in favor? Opposed or sustained? Motion carries. Second action item is Resolution 066A 2026, authorization of managers for designated asset class of global infrastructure. Gray?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This resolution 66A is a corrective resolution to Resolution 66, was just passed by the Board of Trustees in May. We're moving forward with the appointment of the global infrastructure managers, Brookfield and IFM, that were selected. We noted in the earlier signed resolution, we did not name the firms in writing after they were the verbal selection, and further the planned 50-50 share of the 7% asset allocation, which is, it's 10 million in total, was incorrectly described as 10 million each in the public meeting. So we wanted to clear up these two omissions, and that's now been corrected in the Resolution 66A. And then there was a third labeling thing with the name of the asset class. We wanted to read global infrastructure without the word private, to be consistent with the wording in our investment policy statement. So there is no change in the earlier decision to select Brookfield and IFM, and the teams are already working on the onboarding. We've been in contact with the new managers. Look forward to complete the onboarding and have the actual funding, 5 million each by the end of September 30th. Thank you for the committee's vote to advance this resolution for the administrative corrections described.
Thank you, Gray. May I have a motion to approve Resolution R 066A
Chairman, before
2026?
you proceed, I wanted to ask you we don't have any glitches like the previous experience on onboarding these two companies.
Yes, yeah, we've taken that experience and worked with the teams to review documents at a time, so yes.
So there's no more glitches and you anticipate fully vested by end of September.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good point, thanks. So moved. Second?
Second.
Motion is up. Second is accepted. Any discussion? Public comment? All in favor? Any opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention. Motion carries. Thank you. There are two informational items for the committee to review. And are there any public comments? No public comments? If there are no other matters, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Second?
Aye.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Chair.
you.